Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons. And as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or mediocre. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what we get today. So for our first roll, we get an Exterminator's combat shotgun with plus 50% limb damage and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Exterminator's effect is quite possibly the worst of the Slayer's effects in my opinion, just because there's not really a lot of times in the game when you're really going to be hunting down Mirelurks or bugs. Maybe if you're still grinding out reputation with Crater, you might be taking some Mirelurk meat to Ohio River Adventures every day, but are you really going to keep a special weapon around specifically for that? I don't think most players will. So overall, it's kind of worthless there. You're just better off being able to deal with Mirelurks with whatever other weapon that you have, I think. So definitely not exciting on the first star. The second star, plus 50% limb damage, it's not exciting really, especially on a shotgun, because I really feel like if you're going to try to cripple your enemy's limbs, then you're better off using the perks to do that, and that's especially true with the shotguns. With Enforcer, especially if you run rank 3 of Enforcer, you can cripple things very, very quickly and easily with pretty much any shotgun without that second star there. So it's not really doing a whole lot on most weapons, and especially so here. The faster movement speed while aiming, again, that one's not exciting just because if you've got Speed Demon, the Speed Demon mutation that is, then it's not really doing much of anything for you at all. If you don't have that, then it does do what it says, but it really, I don't know that there's a lot of times that you're going to be running around the battlefield while holding the aim button. So kind of an ineffective effect there for the most part. So overall, this one is pretty much just bad. It's just a dud. Let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. So here we've got a Vampire's Black Powder Pistol with bashing damage increased by 50% and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So definitely not much of an improvement here. The Vampire's effect is actually very good. It's one of my favorite effects on the right weapon. This is unfortunately not the right weapon for it because the amount of health that the Vampire's effect heals you per shot, it's not based on the damage of the weapon, which I feel like that's the way it should be, because then it would be useful on slow, hard-hitting weapons, because each shot would heal you quite a bit, whereas the faster-firing, lighter-hitting, I guess, weapons would heal you for much smaller amounts, but they would do so much more quickly, so it would even out there, but that's not the way it works. So while it's not nothing by any means, it's not really that effective on slow, hard-hitting weapons, especially ones as slow as the black powder weapons. So really, I think it's pretty much a dud first star on this one. And then the second star, bashing damage increased by 50%. That's basically a dud on any weapon except for a minigun, and really only then if you're going to mod that thing out to be with the shredder mod and use it as a melee weapon. In that case, the bashing damage increased by 50% is very good, but that's really the only time, because the base bashing damage in this game is so low that adding 50% to it is just not really doing a whole lot for you. So then the third star, plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. It's not bad, especially if you are the type of player who prefers to aim down the sights as opposed to using VATS or hip firing or whatever. Then that's basically just free damage resistance. But if you've got decent damage resistance, somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 damage resistance or more, then you're going to be seeing diminishing returns on that damage resistance there. And it's also worth noting that that is not energy resistant, so it's only giving you extra damage resistance. It's not protecting you against enemy, lasers, plasma weapons, whatever there. So really not very exciting on that third star, so pretty much another dud. Let's see what else we can get. Okay, this one's actually interesting. I don't know if it's actually good, but it's not, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. We might have to try it out at some point here. We've got a Bloodied Pipe Pistol with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and plus 1 agility. So the Bloodied effect is, in my opinion, the best first star in the game for most weapons in most circumstances. There are certain situations where I do prefer a vampire's effect or a quad effect, or, if I was going to be a full health build, then I obviously wouldn't want the bloodied effect, but the anti-armor effect and other things like that can be pretty good as well. But really, I think overall King of the Hill is bloodied. It's definitely the highest damage bonus in the game if you are running at Nerd Rage, which is 20% health or lower. So that's a great first star. The second star, VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage, is excellent because this is definitely the kind of weapon that you could use almost exclusively in VATS, and if you don't mod it out to be a rifle, and even if you do, the damage isn't going to go up that much because it's 38. I don't remember off the top of my head if you can modify this one to use a different ammo type to get better damage. I'd have to look at that, but I don't believe so off the top of my head. So the damage on this weapon is going to be generally pretty low per shot, so you're going to be better off modifying it out to be fully automatic, generally speaking. So that means that if you're built right, built around crits, then you can, using VATS, get a lot of crits very quickly using an automatic weapon like this. So getting some extra damage from those crits is great, and it's also very useful in boss fights, although this is probably not the best weapon for a boss fight. But, if you wanted to roleplay like a true Wastelander who just, scavenge together whatever they can get to survive, then it might be kind of interesting. But, for most players who are just looking to use the best gear that they can get a hold of, this is probably not it. But it's still kind of interesting. But the VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage, that helps with the damage against the bosses because criticals actually bypass the automatic damage reduction that the bosses have. So that makes them very powerful, and that also makes that a very powerful second star against bosses. And then the +1 agility, it's not the best third star, but at the same time it's pretty solid just because it does give you a little bit more stealth, which you would probably be using if you're going to go commando build with a weapon like this, whether you're going to use it as a pistol or as a rifle. You probably put a suppressor on it and try to get some extra damage from the sneak attacks, because, like I say, the damage on this weapon is pretty low compared to other weapons in the game. So getting some extra damage that way and being able to stay a little bit more stealthy and have a little bit more action points because of your third star with +1 agility is a good thing. It's not doing a whole lot for you because that extra stealth and that extra AP is not a lot from only a single extra point, but it's not terrible. So this one's at least interesting. We might see this one on a weapon spotlight at some point just to see how good it actually is. We'll have to see how that goes, but let's see what else Murmur has for us today. Okay, we've got a fixer, and we have a stalker's fixer with plus 25% damage while aiming and +1 perception. So Murmur decided to tease us a little bit, because I got excited there for a second, and unfortunately it's the stalker's effect, which in my opinion is probably the worst first star in the game, at least for legendary ranged weapons at this point, because whereas all the others at least have some situation where they could have some utility or use or something, I just don't really see the benefit of the Stalker's effect, especially since it doesn't actually seem to do what it says. It says that if you're not in combat, you should get plus 100% VATS accuracy at an extra AP cost. So I would expect that to mean that if I'm not in combat, I target something in VATS, I fire, I hit, guaranteed. That happens most of the time with a Stalker's weapon from my testing, but not 100% of the time. So, you know, that's kind of misleading there, at least. I don't know if that's intentional or if that's a bug or what the deal there is, but regardless, I just don't like that effect. It doesn't really do anything once you get into combat. It's just bad. The plus 25% damage while aiming, that's an excellent effect, especially, again, if you're the type of player who prefers to aim down sights as opposed to using VATS or hip firing. So I'm not really the type of player who would typically use a fixer aiming down the sights. I do with my heavy guns, but I would typically use a fixer in VATS, so it's not the ideal second star for me, but I'm sure there are players out there who prefer to aim down the sights with their fixers or other rifles. So it's great. Second star for that just gives them 25% free damage for what they're doing naturally. And then the plus 1 perception, unfortunately it doesn't really synchronize very well or, match up well with the second star, because the main benefit from +1 perception is a little bit more VATS accuracy, but if you're using VATS, then you're not getting the extra damage while aiming, so that's unfortunate, but at the same time, the extra benefit, just like with agility, just like it was with agility, the benefit from perception is pretty low just because it's a single point, and that's not going to give you a whole lot of bonus. So overall, this one is very disappointing. If the first star was better, it could actually be pretty good, but unfortunately it's not. So let's see if Murmur might actually have something truly good for us today. Well, this isn't it, but here we've got a Mutants Tesla rifle, with the last round of the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, and hits have a chance to generate a stealth field. So, the Mutants effect is, it's not terrible. I mean, it's 25% extra damage if you've got up to 5 mutations. If you have more than that, it caps out at 5 for 25%. So, that's its biggest drawback, in my opinion, is that the maximum damage bonus that it can provide is significantly lower than equivalent stars, like the Aristocrats or Junkies effects can give you plus 50%. So, at the same time, there's not really much in the way of cost there, because sure, your mutations have drawbacks, but if you've chosen your mutations wisely, then they're not really going to be affecting your character all that dramatically as far as drawbacks go, so not really too much of a drawback, and you're not giving anything up otherwise from the first star. The second star, the last round of magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, it's pretty much just bad. It's kind of like not having a second star on the weapon at all. Now, the Tesla rifle has such a small magazine size that if you're using it as a fully automatic version, that you might actually get a little bit of utility out of it, but even so, it's still just bad. So we're just going to leave that at that. And then the hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. I haven't really tested that out with loud weapons. I've tested it out with stealth-based weapons, suppressed or silent weapons, and it doesn't seem to do a whole lot in those cases, but that's because my characters are built for stealth, so they're able to stay in stealth without too much difficulty, even without that effect. But I've had some comments made on my videos that they were actually able to stay in stealth reasonably effectively with a flamer, I believe they said. So it's possible that it might be somewhat useful for a fast-firing loud weapon, or at least, I don't know if I think there's only one volume of loud in the game as far as the game reacts to, if I remember correctly. I could be mistaken on that, but regardless, it's something interesting to test out, although this is probably not the weapon I'd really want to do that with. So again, this one's pretty much a dud. If the first star was a little bit better, it might be worth something, but unfortunately it's not. So let's go ahead and keep going here. And here we've got some more stalker stuff. We've got a stalker's broadsider with plus 25% damage while aiming and 15% faster reload. So we talked about the stalker's effect before, so I'm not going to go into that again, but basically everything I said about it there applies here. The 25% damage while aiming bonus, that's actually very good again on this weapon, especially because it has high base damage, so 25% of that high base damage is going to be a pretty good chunk of damage and give you a good chance of getting more of those one-hit kills, which is what you really want to be getting with a weapon like this. So that's great. The 15% faster reload, unfortunately, it doesn't stack very well with the speed demon mutation. If you have the speed demon mutation, it does speed things up a little bit as far as your faster reload, but it's not as much as you would like, so it's definitely not bad. And if you don't have the speed demon mutation, then it's great. But if you do have it, then it's definitely not the best thing. I would much prefer to see 90% reduced weight on this particular weapon, just because it's kind of heavy and it's not the kind of weapon that I think too many players are going to be keeping around for their primary, farming weapon or whatever. So, yeah, this one's pretty unexciting as well, even though the second and third star are at least decent. So, let's see what else Murmur has for us today. Okay, well, this one could have been good. We've got a quad 10 mil 10mm pistol, with the last round in the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, or the last shot effect again, and +1 perception. So the quad effect is, in my opinion, consistently one of the best first stars in the game. It's, as far as damage per shot, it doesn't do anything. It does not increase your weapon's damage per shot, not one little bit. But what it does do is it increases your damage per second against bigger enemies, such as bosses, or even, things like behemoths, super mutant behemoths, Mirelurk queens, things like that, that a 10mm pistol might not have the ammo capacity to handle in one mag. Well, the quad version might have enough. So that's a very powerful effect just in and of itself, because really, if you want to be effective in this game, one of the keys to doing so is being able to take enemies down quickly. That's why, well, if you saw our weapon spotlight video a couple weeks ago, I think it was, with the hunting rifle, it seems like a great weapon, but it's just so slow that you can get yourself into trouble and not be able to get out of it. So a faster firing weapon with a good magazine is very powerful in this game. The unfortunate thing is that the second star is the last shot, and increasing the magazine size ×4 actually makes that second star even worse than it otherwise would be. So yeah, that's great. The +1 perception, we talked about it before. This is definitely the kind of weapon that I would use almost exclusively in VATS to get to benefit from not only targeting the weak points, but also the VATS critical hits. So, and that's because pistols in this game are generally a bit underpowered compared to other weapons, so you definitely want to be getting some extra damage anywhere that you can if you really want to be efficient. If you're just doing a role-playing build or just kind of going around having fun messing around, then, do whatever makes you happy there. But if you really want to be efficient, then that matters. So, unfortunately, the +1 perception bonus is only giving you a little bit of bonus to your VATS accuracy. So, not super exciting. The first star is great. The third star is not bad. The second star is basically worthless. So, this one I would classify as pretty mediocre. Something someone, mid to lower levels could use until they got their hands on something better. But here we've got a Vampire's Cryolator with +50% limb damage and +250 damage resistance while reloading. So the Vampire's effect, we talked about a little bit earlier. Now, this weapon definitely fires fast enough to take full advantage of the Vampire's effect. And the Cryolator is kind of interesting in that it's not a very good weapon as far as using it as a farming weapon or, just going around and soloing things. You're probably going to struggle a bit with it, or at least burn through a ton of Cryolator ammo as you just keep things frozen until they die. So, in that regard, it's not very good, but it does have the utility of being able to slow down bosses very quickly, or very much. So, that can actually be very powerful for a group. So, it's useful in that regard, and the Vampire's effect on it can be good because it'll help keep you alive while you're taking that more of a support role. But I really think you'd be better off with the quad effect on this weapon. That's really what I would be looking for a Cryolator for that purpose. The second star, +50% limb damage, I guess it could be kind of good for, going against bosses if you wanted to target the limbs and try to cripple one of their limbs while you were freezing them. But really, overall, I just don't think that's very good, especially on this weapon. So the third star, +250 damage resistance while reloading. That one is... It suffers from the same problem, really, that the +50 damage resistance while aiming has, and that is the diminishing returns if your armor is at 300 to 400 or more, as well as the fact that it does not include energy resistance. So, in theory, it's a great thing to be getting some extra damage resistance while you're reloading. It would just be nice if it was like a percentage instead of just damage resistance. So, overall, this one's kind of mediocre. It's probably on the lower end of mediocre. Nothing exciting by any means. So we've got a couple more rolls here. Let's see what else we can get. Okay, well, this one's kind of interesting to talk about at least. We've got a Furious Gatling laser with plus 50% VATS hit chance and 90% reduced weight. So, first of all, this is the Gatling laser, not the Ultrasight Gatling laser, which is disappointing in and of itself because the damage is lower on the Gatling laser versus the Ultrasight Gatling laser, which is different from the laser pistol versus the Ultrasight laser pistol or guns. So, something to keep in mind there. The Furious effect is an interesting effect because it does, I believe, top out at 50% the same way that Aristocrats and Junkies does, which makes it potentially one of the more powerful of the full health build first stars. But the unfortunate thing is that you have to hit your target a lot of times, like 9 or 10 or 11 times, before you start seeing the full benefit from that. And usually that's not going to happen a lot, especially with high damage weapons, but even with higher speed weapons, you're usually going to take most enemies down in a few shots. Definitely not 9 or 10 or 11 or whatever for most enemies, ghouls, super mutants. Now, some things like a super mutant behemoth or a Mirelurk Queen or a Scorch Beast, or especially the endgame bosses, that's going to be a different story. But also, if you happen to miss and hit something nearby, then it resets that count, which is a big drawback for the Furious effect. But overall, it can be useful, especially with a weapon like this that fires super fast, one of the fastest firing weapons in the game. Against big bosses, that could be useful. Definitely not my first choice for a first star in that situation, but it is something that you could do worse than. And I could see some, low to mid-level players using that as their weapon of choice, maybe not this particular version, but something that is Furious as their weapon of choice until they get their hands on something better, because it does at least provide some bonus, and if the weapon fires fast enough, you'll at least see some benefit from it. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, unfortunately, is pretty worthless on this weapon. Not that you couldn't try to use it in VATS, it's just that it fires so quickly that it's going to burn through your AP pool very, very quickly, and you're just going to be forced to either aim down the sights or hip fire it for a good chunk of the time that you're firing it, unless you are just very carefully attacking only solo enemies with it. So, pretty unexciting on the second star, even though I really do like that second star on the right weapon. The third star is absolutely the perfect star for a weapon like this, just because they're naturally heavy. So, having their weight reduced, and the fact that these weapons don't have a whole lot of modifications to put on them, because it's important to keep in mind that the mods that you put on the weapons change the weight, and they are not benefiting from that 90% reduced weight. So, the fewer mods that you put on, the more benefit you're likely to see from that 90% reduced weight effect, and most heavy guns don't tend to have a ton of mods like rifles and pistols tend to. So, overall, this one is not exciting, but it's interesting to talk about at least. So, we've got one more roll here. Come on, how about something good here, Murmur? Well, this one's kind of interesting. We've got a 2-shot Ultrasight laser pistol with 25% faster fire rate and 90% reduced weight. And I noticed after I said that it was interesting that it's the Ultrasight laser pistol. So, this is what I was talking about when we were talking about the Gatling laser versus the Ultrasight Gatling laser, whereas the Ultrasight is better in that version with the laser pistol or the laser rifle, because you can mod this into a rifle as well. The non-Ultrasight version is the stronger version, which makes no sense to me, but that's the way it works. So, unfortunately, that's disappointing. The 2-shot effect is, on the right weapon, it can be good, but really this isn't the right weapon for it. You really want to pair it with the explosive effect to get maximum benefit. The big drawback to the 2-shot effect, well, there's a couple of them really, is that first of all, it reduces the accuracy of the weapon by a significant amount. But beyond that, it actually it adds 25% damage, base damage of the weapon, to the damage of the weapon, but then it divides the damage that you see on the damage card between 2 different shots. So each one of those shots has to penetrate the enemy's armor, or rather energy resistance or damage resistance, independently, and higher damage shots are better at penetrating armor, so that actually makes it worse at penetrating armor because you have, not only because you have to penetrate it twice, but because the base damage is lower, or the damage that's trying to get through there is lower, it's going to penetrate it less effectively. So, just in general, not a good first star. The second star, 25% faster fire rate, is one of the best second stars in the game, right up there with explosive and things like that, just because, much like the quad effect, it just increases your damage per second. Now, it really depends on the weapon. Some weapons really don't benefit from it a whole lot, like semi-automatic only weapons, or weapons that you mod out to be semi-automatic that already fire as quickly as you can pull the trigger. You're not going to see a lot of benefit from those, from that effect on those. But some weapons that are semi-automatic that fire slowly will see benefit from that. And any weapon that's fully automatic will definitely see benefit from that. So, definitely very strong, just straight up increasing your damage per second. And the 90% reduced weight, this is probably not the weapon you really want to see it on because, the laser pistols, or even if you mod it out as a rifle, is not going to be typically one of the heaviest weapons in the game. And even if it is, it's going to be because of the mods, so you're not going to be getting that much weight reduction benefit from it. So, not particularly good on this weapon, but it is good on some weapons, especially heavy guns, so unfortunately this one is pretty much a dud as well. But we did get a couple of interesting things anyway, at least. We got that Bloodied Pipe Pistol's probably the most interesting one. I feel like there was something else that I'm forgetting. Maybe it was, I think it was the Quad 10 mil, so that one wasn't super exciting, but it's at least a quad. But anyway, that's going to go ahead and do it for today. Please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.